The point is, I've always been nervous about public speaking, but I wanted to be a comedian. Like, again, when I started out, I was thinking, I want to do this as a job. I'm going to make money from this. I don't care. Like, I know I'm going to have to be bad at this for like maybe a year or something. Like, that was my thinking. I was like, I'm probably going to be really bad when I start. I'm going to be awful, but I'm just going to have to power through that, and eventually I'll get good by doing it more.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
Welcome. Today's guest is a philosophical wizard. Ray has a very sharp mind. He's a deep and thoughtful thinker with a kind and compassionate energy that radiates through. He's put his masters in philosophy to good use. You can see why and how he approaches it to his life and comedy. It's all very fascinating. It was an absolute joy to have Ray on. He's very friendly, easy, and funny. All the tools for a masterful conversation. I love this chat, and I think you will too. Before we get into this chat, Ray is touring around Australia and New Zealand, and currently Melbourne for the big comedy festival. Check them out before they sell out. Okay, let's get into it. Ray O'Leary is a comedian and writer. The Kiwi comic, known for his deadpan delivery and iconic grey suit, Ray's been nominated 2 years running for Best Male Comedian by the New Zealand Comedy Guild, and in 2022, he picked up a win for Best Joke and Best TV Comedy Performance after being nominated for Best TV Comedy Performance the 3 previous years. Additionally, he has also been twice nominated for the New Zealand Comedy Festival's prestigious Billy T. James Award. He's also performed alongside top comedic talent, including Flight of the Conchords and Rhys Darby. He's been a staple on Australasian television screens and can be seen on Tens, Have You Been Paying Attention, Thank God You're Here, Cheap Seats, and SBS Patriot Brains, hosted by the UK's Bill Bailey and Sue Perkins. He's also a regular writer for Cheap Seats, Have You Been Paying Attention, and in New Zealand, Ray regularly appears and writes for 7 Days, Have You Been Paying Attention, and much more. In 2023, Ray made his Australian debut to sold-out audiences with his new show, Everything Funny All the Time, Always, and was nominated for Best Newcomer at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. Ray continued a string of sold-out shows throughout New Zealand and added to his TV credits as a contestant on Season 4 of Taskmaster New Zealand. In 2024, Ray returned to the live stage, touring the UK with Melanie Bracewell, and followed up with his new show Your Laughter Is Just Making Me Stronger throughout Australia, New Zealand, and the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. This year, Ray will be back on stage touring his new show throughout Australia, UK, and New Zealand. I Hardly Know Her is sure to be another smash hit for the comedy legend in his two-piece suit. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot. And we chat about being part of the new wave of New Zealand comedy, Thank God You're Here, his magical suit, moving to Australia, jealousy and insecurity, success, working in prison correction policy, Will Anderson's kindness, nerves and anxiety, his comedy voice, and of course, his masters in philosophy. Before we get into this epic chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K. Unless you're listening to it already. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny in Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out at 3:30 Melbourne, Australian time, with the full video of the podcast to be released the following day. Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's get into it. I'm very proud of you and I'm very jealous of you.
Oh, whoa.
You are on my favorite TV show of all time. Thank God You're Here.
Oh, yes.
Tell me about it. Did it blow your mind? I need to know everything.
It did blow my mind. It didn't. I had seen it before in New Zealand, but it was definitely in New Zealand. It did not have the the same cultural impact it had here in Australia. Like in Australia, it is amazing how much people love it. And I do think like one good appearance on that show does have such a huge impact on your career. You know, it's almost like a Johnny Carson invited to the couch kind of moment. And it's so much fun to do. It is so obviously. I mean, people listening probably know what the show is, but you go through a blue door. You don't know what's going to be on the other side of the door, and then you have to improvise in the character and with what's going on, and it's a blur. The whole
it is.
Yeah, I still haven't watched my second one back. I find that one, things like that are kind of hard because, you know, I don't know, and I just know there will be things I said and I'll look back and I'll go, did I say that? There are bits I remember and I've seen some clips, but you just feel like you're in not free fall, but it's just kind of everything's just happening so quickly.
It's like out of body experience.
Yeah. And then I think maybe it was Joel Creasy at the end of his one. He said, "What just happened?" And that is genuinely how you feel. But also the crew, the production the show's incredible. The episode I did, one person's scene, Lloyd Langford's scene, had a camel in it. And I did not see the camel backstage, which is
the logistics.
The logistics of hiding a camel.
Yeah, that's remarkable.
Yeah, and it wasn't even a spoiler for me. You know, but the show is just incredible. You know, they ask you to do it. I highly recommend you say yes. But,
I'm putting it out there. I've had a lot of people that work as part of the staff on it as well, and a lot of guests as well. Joel Creasy. Yeah. Even I had Akmal on the other day.
Oh yes,
and he was on during the originals.
Yes. I watched the originals to brace myself to prepare.
Nice.
I asked them for the old episodes because I'm someone who, thank God You're Here is definitely the kind of show that sort of. Maybe the way to describe it is my approach to life, I guess, is I like to be in control of everything that's going on, or like with stand up, you know, I never do crowd work unless I have a plan for how it's going to go. You know, I don't love that kind of variable nature of comedy, which is a shame because that is kind of what audiences love and respond to. And so I watched as many episodes of Thank God You're Here as I could to research it, to try figure out if there was a logic or a formula, and you know, make sure I felt safe doing the show. You know, plan as much as you can for something you can't plan for.
And could you plan? Like, did you have any pre-prepared jokes and they flew out? Or
there was in the car ride there. I was talking to a friend on the phone, and I did say, I think it'd be funny if I brought up Guy Sebastian.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I did. And at one point, I did bring up Guy Sebastian.
Like, how are you, Guy Sebastian? And you brought it in really nicely as well.
Yes, I think I remember saying, well, they asked me what are the things you need to be a pilot, and they gave me, they're like, you need to have strength, determination, and I think I said appreciation for
Guy Sebastian. Yeah, it's amazing. Great cultural reference, obviously from New Zealand. We'll get into your backstory as well. But it's amazing what that show did, especially in Australia. Like Akmal, for example, I watched him and it actually inspired me to do improv. And because he was so funny, I remember him. Obviously, I've seen him throughout the years through that show, and I reckon that's helped with so much ticket sales, and hopefully does the same with you as well.
No, 100%. It does feel like something, again, it clicked with the Australian public and elevated things. And I think another person who benefited hugely would have been Guy Montgomery. He's phenomenal at that show. I think that show was designed for him, and he's like, you watch the scenes are so good when he's in it. You feel like you're watching a scripted television show. The jokes are so strong, but no, he's just such a phenomenal improviser. But but doing the show itself, it's stressful. In some ways it's stressful because you don't know what's happening, but in another way it's like, well, I can't prepare for anything, so I can kind of just let go. And, in one of the episodes, they dress you up in an outfit, and so you can sometimes guess what you're going to be based on the outfit. And one of the group challenges, I was in a yellow suit, and I remember one of the producers walked by and said, "You're never going to be able to guess what you are." and I was like, well, that's actually quite helpful. So then I just stopped trying to figure out, and I just kind of, sat around and didn't. Because
they can also trick you. I remember from the earlier episodes where you think you're like a fireman, but you're not actually a fireman. You could be a stripper or something like that.
Yeah. I remember Bob Franklin had one where he was dressed like a golfer, and he came in and he was late for marriage counselling because he had been golfing, which is such a funny setup. But for the comedian, you're like, oh, well, I'm going I better think of some golf jokes or golf references and.
Exactly. So how are you? I know you said you like to control through your stand up and your stand up's hilarious. What's that moment like when you get that call, or I don't know how you get it? Are you like worried? Are you scared? Tell me about the lead up.
That's a good question. I guess it's a thing where you're like, oh well, I have to say yes. Like it's like you're like the show's so massive and so beloved. You have to, and it's such an an honor that they even want you to do it. You do. There's an obligation to say yes. But I guess again there's that thing of like, oh my god, I've got this huge thing in my calendar coming up that I just can't control. Like it's just, who knows how it'll go. And I mean I guess this is the podcast for it. I did feel like, I don't know, my first scene was fine, but I definitely wasn't like in love with it. I don't know why that was, but it was so good. I was very lucky I got to then come back in the second year. And that was when I played the Top Gun. I was a Top Gun character, and I think,
very funny.
And I just had, and I watched the show even more, and I just looked at what other people did to, I guess, sort of feel in control of the scene, and I sort of mimicked that, and I think it went a lot better because I was used to the show and I'd done it before.
Oh, interesting.
And I think I'd done things to make me feel like I was sort of not in charge, but I guess was more comfortable and like. Like very early on in the scene, I don't know if they cut it or not because, sorry, I haven't watched it. But like I went up and talked to someone I wasn't meant to talk to, or I saluted for too long and then kept like I was like mucking around.
Yeah,
and that was sort of making me feel more comfortable because I felt like I was taking charge of the scene, and like being like, I know you've got a setup for me to do something over there, but actually I want to talk to this person who's not meant to have a conversation at all,
I like that. It's like giving the power back to you. And there was also in that scene, the two people sitting down made them hold hands and brought them together. Yeah. Because it's also a way of like, I don't know how to explain it, but when I saw it, it was like you owning the scene. Like, yes, there's so much happening, but it's you giving yourself like a second to be in control and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. And there's guys back in the day who would do that. This is Josh Lawson is his name.
Oh yeah.
And he has a phenomenal scene where he's in a submarine, and he goes and picks up a phone he wasn't meant to touch, and he rips it off. Like the prop isn't strong enough for his strength or whatever. And he breaks something, and he's talking to people he's not meant to. And I remember Sean McAuliffe. He's got one of my favorite scenes where he tries to. Yank the host through the blue door with him, and then he sort of acknowledges that there's an audience, and he's just like breaking the fourth wall. He's just and it just these guys, some of the people who do it really well, I think, are people who just feel in control of the room the whole time.
And that goes well with your comedy style. Have you ever done any improv? I know being on TV is improv, but have you had improv experience or learning on the job?
I did a few lessons with Snort, a New Zealand improv group, but only like a handful. Like I want to say 5 at the most.
Yep.
And so I've done that, but I've only ever done improv proper on stage once, and I hated it. It's just not for me. The full proper improv where you're coming onto a blank scene and there's nothing there, and you have to pretend that there are things in the room, and you have to trust your scene partner. It's just all things that are just so out of my wheelhouse, and I hate it. I hated it so much. My friend at one point, I remember she tapped me on the shoulder to get me to come up with her, and I was just so scared. I just stayed sitting there.
Yeah.
And then someone else had to go up with her and stuff, but I was just so deeply uncomfortable. Like I'm okay with like riffing, responding to the audience. There are things that I can do, but I just think it was just and I just don't have the I don't know if it's like I'm just not used to it. I haven't done I just haven't had enough experience doing it to feel comfortable, but I loathed it.
I would imagine that once, if you ever decide to go back, I reckon there'd be like a point where you just get it.
Yeah,
it's just like you'd flick a switch and you become a pro.
Oh, I hope so. I think there is some, maybe there are some improv games I could do, Whose Line Is It Anyway does short form improv, but maybe I'd be okay at that. But but doing the longer scenes, the heralds or whatever.
No, that you need to be a pro. I can't. I don't think I can do them.
And it's nothing on the improv troupe I was working. It was with Something Good is their name. They're on every Wednesdays in Melbourne. They're phenomenal. They're so funny, and it's nothing to do with them. It's just I think any improv troupe I would have been put with. They're also supportive, and improv is sincere in a way that stand-up comedy is not. And I really loathe sincerity. The supportive nature of it, I just don't understand. They're all backstage going like, I forget, they have this particular group, they had like a motto that they said to each other to get them out of their shells or to make sure they felt trusted. And I just remember being like, why are you saying that to me? Like, I don't trust you at all. Like, I feel like
Can you expand on that? Because as you know better than anyone, comedy, or at least stand-up, is an individual sport. Improv, you're all there to support. You're like, no, you're the best. Let's hug. I love you. And you're like, what the hell is it? Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I watch improv shows. Often before them, the performers will do improv games or like little things to prepare. And as a stand-up, you watch that and you're like, what the? You're like, you people are sick. It's just so different to what I'm used to. They're all doing zip, zap, zop and stuff. And like to get them, in the mood to collaborate, and it's just so strange. Whereas stand-up, you show up, you sit in the green room, and you talk. It is actually, it is fun. It is a collaborative art form, but it's fundamentally individual. At the end of the day, it's just you up on stage. It's just you.
Yeah.
No one is saying like, oh, I've got your back. Like, you don't have my back. I'm up there alone.
I don't care whatsoever. How do you work with that? Because I think I heard you talk about it on another podcast as well, where if someone's doing so well, you're like, damn it, I don't want to go on after them. So how do you I know you don't do this, but is it secret? Like, I want you to do well, but not too well, so it takes away from my thunder? Like, how does it?
No, though it's an interesting thing. Like, there is an element of like, if someone does really well, you are like, oh no, like, am I going to be able to live up to that?
Yeah.
But normally, it's actually a huge boon to you if someone goes really well, because it means they've really warmed the crowd up. The crowd's so happy, and provided I'm good, I should still be able to carry on with that energy. So it is. It is an environment where I do think. Like, I do want everyone to succeed. It's actually so much worse if you're doing a gig and everyone is like bombing. That's so much worse, because then you're like, oh no, well, now you've ruined the vibe in the room, and so now I have to get up and do my jokes. And sometimes I feel when like, I do a very deadpan, low energy style of comedy, and I feel like if there's no energy in the room when I get up on stage, I'm definitely not the one who's going to be injecting the room with energy. Like I'm already like, everything's already quiet and reserved, and now I get up there and start slowly talking, and so it is. But I don't know. I don't like if someone does well on a lineup, I don't get mad. The thing that if I ever get mad, I'm mad. I'm primarily mad at myself. I think that I wasn't better, like I don't care about, you do want to be the best on the lineup. You do want to be the funniest, but it's not like in a competition kind of way of like, I want to pulverize everyone and like, I want to drive you into the ground kind of thing. It's more like, I just want to be the best I can be, and I want to be very funny. And normally other people being funny on the lineup
works in your favor.
Yeah, works in your favor. And if you're good, you've got your own point of view, your own point of difference. So it doesn't matter what the other person has done. I did a gig with Mike Goldstein, and and he's, I think, really funny. He tore the roof off the place, and I think he was doing jokes that were completely different to the kinds of things that I went up and talked about, and it was great.
I think that's really awesome, because I've heard so many comedians, and I know you've been doing this for a while, but a lot of comedians, especially when they're first starting out, they're like terrified if someone's going to do well. And I'm like, that doesn't really make sense to me, because if everyone does well, you generally do well. And I've heard people say that they've toured with like bad openers because they want them to be bad so they look funny. I'm like, I don't think that's the best way to look at things.
Yes, I've heard stories like that as well, and I feel the opposite. I feel like if my opener was doing badly, I'd think, oh no, they've like frozen the crowd up, and now it's going to be harder for me. But I think, though, I will say, early on there was definitely that kind of jealousy and insecurity, and definitely a feeling of like,
very normal.
Yeah, or not, because you're not being paid to do comedy. You don't have any of the credits or any of the achievements next to your name, and so you're just like, oh no, am I any good at this or not? I don't know, and so you kind of feel the need to be funnier than people, and get opportunities over them. Because that is all you have. That's the only way to have validation. And so very early on I was definitely jealous and insecure, but definitely now I'm like, oh no, I want the people on this lineup to be competent at their jobs as well. Like, you don't want to be the only good person. You don't want to be the only person who knows how to do the job at your office. That's a really bad. That is a really bad office. That's like, that place is crumbling down, and you're going, I've got no, like, I'm
no one to help.
Yeah. Yeah, and comedy is the same way.
That's a very nice arc, and I'm glad. I appreciate your honesty, because every single person on the planet, including myself, when we first start out doing something, there's insecurities, there's all of that. Also, New Zealand, limited spots.
Yep.
You're also working another job as well. There's so much pressure, mostly internal as well, and limited spots. As I said, if this person does well, what does that mean for me? All of these mind games, and I think it's important to acknowledge, and also the growth. Realizing that you didn't need to be that way.
Yes, it's unfortunate, but I've been talking about it with some friends lately. But it is a sort of a thing where it's quite easy to be gracious in victory, because now I am in a position where I'm very lucky. I've been on TV and
you've earned it.
Oh, thank you. But I am in that position, and so it is quite easy to look back and go, oh, I didn't need to be like that. That was awful. But it's easy now because I have gotten those things, so it is kind of easy to be like, oh, I was wrong to be that way, and it was a mistake. But it's easier for me to say that now because I have come out the other side of it.
But I also challenge you on that. I feel like because you're putting in the work, you're looking at yourself, at your comedy, that you're doing, like, let's say, I know it's a wanky word, like work on yourself, that you were able to progress. You were being honest. If you didn't have that, maybe you wouldn't have gotten to where you are, like those deep internal questions.
Yes, that is true. There is an element of truth to that. I think, at least when it comes to comedy, you do need to be so critical about yourself and your own material. And if you're delusional or like willing to, or just being like, oh, I can't cut any of my jokes. All my jokes are perfect. Everything I write is perfect, and nothing needs to change. I just need to keep doing it. Eventually, people will realize my genius. That's a terrible way to go. But it is interesting. It does sort of seem, no matter where you go in the world, it does feel like the open mic scene in comedy is always quite a somewhat toxic place.
I've heard.
And it's not like where I started, it wasn't even particularly bad. I just think it's the nature of the game where if you're in a place where everyone's starting out, everyone's insecure about how funny they are. There's no money in what you're doing, so you don't even have because as evil as bad as I guess maybe money is a great way to indicate, oh, I'm doing good at my job,
Interesting.
People, if people are willing to pay you to do comedy, there is a sign, oh, I must be good at this, because it's crazy that anyone will want to pay you to do jokes.
Yeah.
But without that, what measure do you have, against anyone else? And so I think that sort of manifests bad feelings amongst people and can create quite a bad environment. But once you get past that, the professional comedy scene, I think, is quite a nice place, and people, a relatively nice place, at least in my experience. In Australia, I mean, maybe I'm this anyway, but in Australia and New Zealand, I think it's a largely more positive place, more supportive, and people, I think, have achieved things, so they feel comfortable with themselves. Don't feel the need to be like, why the hell do they have that and I don't have that?
That's very interesting. There's two questions. Well, one, just a statement. I believe you're on Will Anderson's podcast a little while ago, and he's an inspiration to me in that he actually seems to mentor or give advice and help people. And he's done it all. I think he doesn't, and please don't get angry with me, I could be wrong. Pretty sure he doesn't even put his hand up for everything because he's like, I want someone else to do it. And that's very rare. I wouldn't do that. But he's he loves comedy, loves people growing and, expanding in the field. And I'm like, that is truly an inspiration. Yes,
I had friends from New Zealand who used to run a show called Fan Fiction Comedy. One of them is now Joseph Moore, who's in Two Hearts, a musical duo.
Yep.
And Will Anderson used to help pay for them to come to Melbourne and do their shows. So he was, he puts his money where his mouth is. So he is genuinely super supportive and is trying to bring people up, which is great. So wonderful to see.
I didn't know that. What a legend. He's very humble as well. And then going back to the open mic scene, I know you've spoken about this before, but I find it funny. I've gone to a few and I've seen it, but I haven't seen it quite because I haven't done it that much. But the type of people you get, because whenever, as you said, whenever people are starting out, they might lack self-awareness, and you said delusion. Have you just seen some of the most horrible, I'm not even talking about racist and all that stuff. Have you just seen people that you're like, what are you doing on stage? Get off. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. It's actually, it's almost sometimes disappointing when an open micer isn't racist or sexist. Because, you're like, well, I'm here and I want to see a train wreck. Yeah. And so if you just got to be kind of middling and bland, get off the stage. Yeah. There are definitely some people I've seen in starting out. Like they started out maybe even slightly before me, and they were doing these jokes, and then I see them, 5, 6, 7 years later, and I've moved cities, or I've managed to do different things, and they're still at the same gigs doing the same jokes, and you do wonder, what are you, there's that classic Einstein quote of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, and it is like, what is going on here? What do you think? What do you think why do you keep doing it? Why, maybe they just love those jokes. They just love performing that much. But, I don't know. When I first started, I always thought, I want to do this as a job. I need to be able to do this as a job. So I was never, I did love it, but, there was an element of like, I need to make this work. And so I would never be the kind of person, I think, to,
I reckon it's partly fear, and I'll get into your journey in a sec, because if you're doing the same things, also normally it's like that comedian that's been doing it for like 5 years and they've had some success. Yeah. I know these jokes work, I'm going to do it, and then it's a very short-term outlook. It's not a long-term outlook. Maybe fear. But it's just, as you know, like especially when you're first starting out, if you want to do it for your career, you can't do the same jokes the whole time. It's not going to last.
Yeah, and there are some comedians, these aren't the comics I was referring to earlier, but there are some comedians who just do the same gags over and over again, and they're really, really funny. And there are some that even do it for 20 years plus, around the world. They'll just, it seems like, especially in America, from the impression I get is it sounds like it's very common to sort of develop. Like I think Jay Leno maybe has talked about developing his like 50-minute set or whatever, and he just always does that set. And,
wow.
But I could be wrong. Maybe he writes new material all the time. But
it doesn't sound very fun.
Yeah. But there are some comics who just have the same gear and they just do it over and over, and they are very good. They're very talented and they do get booked and stuff. But I do think, it depends on what you want out of comedy. But if you want to be the kind of comic who sort of develops their own audience and has people really wanting to come see them, you can't really do the same jokes year after year after year, because that crowd will eventually go, oh, hold on, I think we've heard this 3 or 4 times now. We can't keep coming back.
That's really unique, and the American model especially, they don't have like the comedy circuit like Australia and New Zealand, where you're pretty much forced to every year get completely new material or expand. Whereas in America, you correct me if I'm wrong, they're working on that 5, 15, 20-minute bit so they can get on Jay Leno or whatever those shows. So you mentioned like they might have a different outlook or view on comedy. So what's yours? What excites you for the year ahead? Like what's the overall?
Oh, that's a really good question. What excites me? I do. Yeah, I am someone who I don't want to end up being the kind of comic who's doing the same gags over and over again. So I am glad I've sort of been forced into the Edinburgh model, I guess. It's sort of has infiltrated all around sort of the Anglosphere apart from America.
Yeah.
I guess writing a new show every year, which is it's people complain about it that that it's not enough time to write a really good show. But the issue is if you don't book in a show every year, you just won't write a show at all. So
exactly.
So it's better to have a show. Yeah, exactly.
It's a balance.
100%. Yeah. So I guess every year my goal is always just to write a really, really good show. It's interesting. I do sometimes think about what excites me on stage, but normally I'm always just trying to think of what is just going to get a really big laugh. That
could be the excitement.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. I guess that's what I like, is getting a really big laugh. But there is an element of I don't pursue that mindlessly though. Like there are some comics who I think get really, really big laughs, and I hate them. You watch them, and you're like, oh, this is terrible. There's no craft or I don't know, uniqueness here. So I it's not solely in pursuit of a big laugh, but I am someone who wants to do something that makes audience. I pursue that big laugh in hopefully a creative and interesting way. And I do enjoy Stuart Lee's type of material. I do enjoy sort of being meta in that kind of way as well. I enjoy looking like I'm having a bad time on stage. I enjoy making it seem like everything's sort of going badly, or like the audience haven't responded in the way I would like. But yeah, I know. But when I think about goals for the year, I just think about, I guess, touring, becoming a better and better stand-up comedian. Like the TV show, obviously I do like the television show appearances, and I would love them to continue.
Yeah.
But always ultimately it's in service of being a stand-up comedian and being able to sell tickets to the show. You know, those TV shows are marketing opportunities, really. You know, because they're not solely an end of themselves. I mean, they're super fun to do, and I'm so lucky I get to do them. But really, stand up always has been the thing I've been wanting to pursue, even though, you know, there are times where I hate it. And I'm like, oh yeah, but it's always, I want to be a really, really good stand up. And that's part of why, you know, I've moved I've moved cities a few times, and that's because I want to go to scenes where I can gig more and get better opportunities. And it's always in pursuit of stand up. You know, the dream has been able to sell out a show and perform to your crowd, and, you know, and they all get it, and, you know, and that's always the goal.
I like that, and I've got so many questions, so we'll see how we go. For me, like, when you analyze a joke, and from what I've seen, you're like a forensic scientist or analyst. You like the way that you're like a craftsman with jokes, so you're like a purist in that form.
Oh, thank you.
And it's really interesting because, to me, like, a lot of people, and everyone's got different goals and values or whatever. Yours is like always in the pursuit of like expanding your comedy, so that's the goal.
Yes.
And, you know, the joy that you get is not necessarily just from the laughs, but just the whole process. I know there's a lot of tedious bits and trying to get the new bits, but it sounds like you're able to enjoy more of the craft than just purely the laughs, which a lot of people just want the laughs. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. There are definitely jokes I hear that get a laugh, and you're like, oh, but you shouldn't tell that joke. You know, like, but that's not a well-crafted joke, or that's not like an interesting joke, or like, you know, that's shameful. There's I would agree with that. The forensic approach, it's when I was first starting out, again, when you're insecure and you don't know what your place is in the comedy scene, I used to have this, I guess it felt like there was this dichotomy, like you're either a writer or a performer. And I was always like, oh, maybe I'm just a writer, and it's almost like a mistake that I'm on stage, and it's just that we're in New Zealand and there's just no other opportunities to be a writer, so anything I write I have to say myself. And maybe the way I perform almost comes across that way. But
No. I mean from someone that understands comedy, not from a performance line.
Yeah.
I can tell that you've thought and how you've analyzed, and I've heard you talk about it.
It's
not robotic at all, if that's what I believe.
Oh, thank you. No.
I'm saying that you're clearly someone that understands, like, models of understanding what a joke is and the craft behind it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I do. Yeah, hopefully I have thought about it. And I was thinking about this I was listening to one of your podcasts, thinking about it myself, about when I was growing up. And I think I remember being a teenager trying to think of, like, why are jokes funny, and I think I don't think I came, maybe I somehow Googled it, or I came across the incongruity theory, or I had I managed to maybe come to an idea that was something that somewhat approximated the incongruity theory, I used to want, I cared about comedy and, like, what made things funny. I think definitely a lot more than what any normal person would worry about. But the craft is important, and I was actually talking to someone last night who said you can tell by watching your comedy that you studied philosophy, because of the way you approach things, and also that a lot of your material sort of revolves around sort of pointing out the flaws and logic of what other people have done, and then it's sort of quite analytical and hopefully somewhat in depth.
I feel like, so just for context, you did your master's in philosophy. I feel that's giving you more tools to analyze from different angles, and also to pick apart things as well, and giving you, like, kind of a framework to look at it a bit more holistically, or not just with, like, linear, laser-like view.
Yes, I'd hope so. And the more I think about it, philosophy does feel. I used to actually write my sets almost like a philosophical argument, or like the things I learned in philosophy were actively underpinning what I was writing, because so back in the day when I very first started, for a tiny period of time I did political material. I was a lot more political, but eventually I very quickly became disillusioned with it, because I was just like, what's the point of doing political material? Because eventually only people who agree with you show up to your shows, and so then you feel like you're preaching to the choir, and it just felt like, it felt pointless in a way.
So also sometimes, I'm not saying this is your comedy, when I'm not saying just political, but when you can get more claps as opposed to laughs.
Oh, that was. I mean, I remember. Maybe it was even before he became. Maybe even before he became the presumptive nominee. But I remember seeing someone do a Trump joke at an open mic in Wellington, and I remember thinking like, oh, okay, Trump jokes are done. This is like this is already a boring topic.
Yeah.
And I think I was proven right on that.
Because I want to expand on what you just said. It's important. You've also brought this up before. As a comedian, you want laughs, and if people are just clapping with you, it's not necessarily a comedy show. You're just getting people to hear like your views and points. But as a comedian, the value's in the laughs as well, and it's not quite the same.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, my job is not to make you feel like you've been agreed with. It's to make things funny. And to be fair, there isn't obviously a value in political comedy, and I think there's lots of fantastic political comedy out there. I love so much of it. Yep. And there probably is a value of like, if you record yourself doing some, political bit, and then you can put it up on YouTube, and maybe some kid in a small town who doesn't feel like he has anyone else maybe you can change.
Interesting. Yeah.
Maybe you can change people's minds through that kind of.
I think you can.
Yeah, but for the most part, it did feel like just preaching to the choir,
yeah.
and so I became disillusioned with it. But anyway, the way I would write bits though is that in philosophy there's a thing called reductio ad absurdum, which means reduced to the absurd, and so the way the way it works is sort of like, say you have you're like, oh, it's always morally wrong to lie, and then someone might say, oh, but what if an ex-murderer showed up at your door and asked where your family and children were? Would it be okay to lie then? And you go, oh yeah, it would. And then in that example, you've sort of reduce them to the, like your view would say, if you always thought lying was wrong, then you would have to tell the truth to the ex-murderer, which is obviously absurd.
Yeah.
And so therefore your view is wrong.
Yep.
And that's sort of, that's how one of the many ways of philosophy works. And so in my head I was like, I believe this, and so that means my opponents believe not that. And if my opponents believe the opposite and they're wrong, then there must be a way of showing that their views are absurd, and there must be a funny way to do that. And so that was sort of the approach I had of like, if I believe something, I have to believe it's right. Therefore, I have to believe my opponent is wrong. Therefore, I have to believe there's an absurdity in what they think. And if it's absurd, that must mean it's funny. And that was kind of...
But that sounds so much fun as well, applying that type of logic.
Yes. And it is nice, I suppose, finding people you disagree with and going like, here's all the ways you're stupid, But again, there's probably still an element of the exploiting of the logic and
what you do now.
Yeah, making fun of like hearing silly things I hear, but it's definitely less politically charged and maybe not as explicit as it was when I first started.
But that's still awesome that it's giving you a framework as well. But also for me, that's a really fun and funny way to tackle a subject, because you're not just looking at it through one lens. You're like, how absurd can I get? Yeah. And like exploring those ideas. And then you probably laugh as well in your head, like, oh, what about this or what about this?
Yes, and it was a lot of fun. And oh god, I hit a point, but it's immediately escaped my brain. I'm so sorry.
No, do not apologize, and I'm sure it will come. We can come back to it.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're 10 times smarter than me.
No, that is not true. That is not true.
You do not need to apologize. But I just love that framework, and I love how like that's given you something as well, because in all things, I know this is a ridiculous example, I'm probably going to be embarrassed, but like with the house, you need a base to build the house, and with comedy you've got a very strong base and foundation, and you can go off it and you can try, but you still got that base and that foundation, and you've obviously done a lot of work of analyzing jokes and how it applies, so I think that's great.
Thank you. And the other thing, the other obvious similarity I think between philosophy and comedy is that philosophy, you're trying to build an argument. You're trying to show why this thing is true, and philosophy, in comedy, you also tend to making arguments, but you're trying to prove something ridiculous, and so there is a logic to it, but the logic is a lot more twisted and doesn't necessarily have to hold up to scrutiny.
Exactly. So applying all of this, you got that background as well. Did your style and voice come easy for you? I know you can't, it's hard to compare to other people, but I feel like you kind of would have got your voice and style. Yes, there would have been little bits along the way.
Yeah, I would say I got it immediately.
Oh,
at least maybe immediately is maybe that's too soon. But very like the reason why I'm so deadpan on stage is just because I can't do anything else. Like it wasn't so much as a like I thought about all the different options I could do and just stuck with this one. It's a complete inability.
We'll agree to disagree. But even how you've decided, you said to be like low energy or lower energy, like those are all little choices. It might seem like smaller choices, but they all build who you are on stage as well.
Yes, but they were all compelled out of an inability to be anything else. I would love to say there was some genius decision making behind it, I've told this story before, but I remember very early on in my career when I was doing the open mics and stuff, and a woman on the scene, she said, look, I know it's part of your character, but you should try looking at the audience when you perform. And I was like, oh, she thought it was this genius character decision I'd made, but I was like, no, I'm so nervous up there. Like all I can do is look at my feet, and I had to train it out of me actually. I remember another comic pointed out every time you tell a punchline, you quickly look down and then look back up, and I think that was still the looking at the feet thing.
Yeah.
But it was just I was so nervous to be on stage, and I am naturally, I'm naturally not the most energetic, ecstatic man, and so. It was an exaggeration of myself, but it was an element of like I'm so nervous to be up here. All I can do is just kind of
in that space.
And that sort of, and it is good and bad. It does make you different from other comics, and it also eliminates things that I can't really do act outs. I never really do these big things where I'm like, oh, imagine I'm a vampire and I'm
I think you still could in your way, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
As well. But also, everyone's got a different voice. Like some people, one-liner comedians.
Yes.
Every comedian I've spoken to, they're like, I wish I could do the one-liners.
Yeah.
Whereas like the one-liners, like, I wish I could tell a story like that. And it's so funny because there's so many different styles, but you've obviously found the one that works for you.
Yes, I feel like my style is like a horrific, horrific halfway point between one-liners and maybe story. Maybe not stories, but I always felt like, I'm not really like the way I write bits. It feels like it's a series of one-liners, but they're all about one topic.
Yep.
So it feels like there's a flow and a
I like that.
But it's not. It's also not a story. But it's just like how many jokes can I think of on this one topic? Bang, 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 bang.
That's great, and I think it works well on you. I know you said it may have not been conscious, but your styles are unique, and people remember you for that. People appreciate it as well.
I will say there were definitely decisions about my comedy that I made very early on.
Okay.
That were I have always thought the longer you can talk about a topic, the better you are a comedian. And that was from watching Stuart Lee before I'd even started. And he would do, he could do a 25-minute bit about a slogan on a cider advert. And, he would do things like that. And so I was like, oh, the goal is to be able to do something like that.
Yep.
So I always thought you needed to write as many jokes about one topic as you could. I very quickly decided I never wanted to talk about sex on stage, and I don't know how early on, but I very quickly ruled out swearing as well. Like I became
the Jerry Seinfeld approach.
Yeah, and like Jerry Seinfeld, like I don't advertise myself as a clean comedian, and I don't, and I think it would be a mistake too, because I think the wrong people would come, because I still think my material can be quite dark and is not for kids or anything like that. Like I'm willing to joke about inappropriate subjects. I just won't be graphic sexually or swear, but it's still I wouldn't bring you 5-year-old kid like I'll make a joke about an abortion.
And why did you make that choice?
There are lots of decisions. One is that looking back is I quite like that there are lots of people who say, oh, comedians swear too much or they rely on swearing, so it is quite nice to have an audience that if they want to hate you, they have to hate you for you. You don't have an excuse. You can't be like, oh, he swore too much. You're like, no, you just have to hate me. You can't hide behind that. There was also economic factors. I realised, like the New Zealand Gala, for example, that aired in prime time, and so you couldn't really swear or do anything like that. So, and I didn't want to have to get to a position where I then had to rewrite all these jokes because I'd put swears all through them. I did also thought maybe a sense of like an artistic challenge, because
it can be easier to swear sometimes.
Yeah, it can be, and if you don't swear, it can be harder. Which is, I'm not trying to knock swearing in comedy, because sometimes, Drew Carey, for example, there are like Drew Carey. He's a comic who doesn't swear, and I've seen him talk about, there are jokes where you kind of have to swear. and I will swear on stage. I have, like my last show, I dropped the C-bomb once, and that's the only swear I say. Cool. But I felt like it made, it worked for a joke.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do think it forces you to pick other words. But there are comics who I think do need to swear. Like there's a character Chopper Reed, and it would be crazy if he didn't swear. Yeah. Like you're meant to be a murderer, of course. Like that's so like
this being a silly Billy. Stop
exactly, it. Yes. It just doesn't tonally would work. Yeah, he needs to swear.
Yeah,
but and sometimes swearing does express a level of indignation that no other word can. Like if you were really upset at something, it would be weird to go, oh gosh darn it, that doesn't,
Yeah, I get that.
And then the final thing is it sort of made me. I think it makes you feel more alien, sort of creating a disconnect with the audience, almost like purposefully trying to do that, because it is normal for people to swear. Everyone swears now, it's
part of our language.
Yeah. It's just a part of normal everyday speech, and by not swearing, it sort of makes me weirder and sort of creates a distance from normal people, which I quite liked.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And just while this springs to mind, and I like how you've thought about it as well. It's very smart, and also the longer term factors, like you said, like money and being on prime TV. From the nerves side, you said you used to be very nervous and anxious, and you implied that you did a bit of work on it. What has helped with that?
With everything with comedy, the only thing that worked was just doing it more and more. And so it wasn't like I didn't take classes or anything like that. And I will say I was always someone who was very nervous about, we all are nervous about public speaking.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, we had a speech element as part of our class, and
cool.
The teacher gave us an option to do our speech in front of just him and during the lunch, because he knew people would get nervous, and I elected to do that. I did not do my speech in front of the class.
That's still very scary. Sorry for interjecting. When a teacher's like, come into a room, close the door, just you and me.
Actually, the school my brothers and sisters went to, actually a teacher just got done. Anyway,
I wasn't. I was onto something.
My school was fine though. And also to be a prefect at my school, you had to do a speech in front of the rest of the year, and I didn't want to do that, so I just didn't. And I was also a nerdy kid, so there was probably a good chance I could have become a prefect if I just applied. But I just didn't want to do the speech. It was it freaked me out. And so anyway, the point is I've always been nervous about public speaking, but I wanted to be a comedian. Like, again, when I started out, I was thinking I want to do this as a job. I'm going to make money from this. I don't care. Like, I know I'm going to have to be bad at this for like maybe a year or something. Like, that was my thinking. I was like, I'm probably going to be really bad when I start. I'm going to be awful, but I'm just going to have to power through that, and eventually I'll get good by doing it more.
That's very brave of you, especially when that fear is so strong, and you've explained that you're quite aware of it as well. And to often, in my life, my friends, no judgment, they've let fear, and we all have at various degrees, we let fear get the best of us, and we just sweep it under the rug and go, I can't do that because there's public speaking. But you actually did it. I think that's very unique, especially for something that is so scary.
I mean, I will say though, there was at least a year that I wanted to do comedy, probably longer, and I just did not do it. So there was at least a year of me just being nervous.
But I think that's important, and I had that as a point that I was going to bring up as well. So I appreciate it.
So I don't want to make it sound like
totally.
I just had this light switch and went on and did a gig.
But I think that's also equally impressive that for that year or whatever that period was, that it was still on your mind, and you're working through it in your own way, but you still went up.
Yes, and during that time I kept a notebook and I would write down joke ideas. I wouldn't write proper jokes, but I would have premises and stuff, and they were all hack and terrible. But I was keeping all these thoughts because
you're still being the comedian. You just were getting up on stage.
Because I was scared, and the whole time just absolutely fearful. I'm trying to remember
about the fear and how you.
Oh yes, sorry.
No sorries.
Yeah, I remember being in high school and uni as well, and you notice that with people, and I noticed that in myself, the fear of trying and being bad at something.
Yes, I had that as well.
Oh, it's such a very real fear. But there's a great line in the movie Hairspray, which I was obsessed. I loved. We had a DVD of it when I was a teen, and Christopher Walken has a line right at the end of the film, and he says, "Do it now, or forever wish you had," which I think is an incredible piece of
powerful.
advice.
Yeah.
But I remember even watching a friend of mine. We were at uni, and we were playing rugby between like our student houses or whatever it was. And I remember our side was doing really badly, and eventually he sort of started being silly. Like I remember he tied a friend of mine. Yeah, he started like tying his hands together, and like I don't know, was put on maybe he put on something on his head, like this jersey over his head or whatever. And it was clear because we were doing so badly, he was sort of stopping trying and acting like it was just kind of a joke.
Yeah,
and it felt I was like watching ego death in real time. You know, like I was like, oh, this guy has, we've tried and we've failed, and now to cover up for it, he's going to act like it was a joke, and we just weren't really trying the whole time. And it's again that thing of no one wants to try and fail and realize they were just bad at it. And so that fear is something I'd observed in others and definitely felt in myself. But the nervousness, that fear, the only way to get through it is to keep gigging, is to keep performing, is to I guess it's exposure therapy.
Yes.
Like that. I sometimes get upset because I'm like, oh, these jokes aren't good or whatever. But the only way to get better is to get back up on stage and try different jokes or work on the jokes and actually get the laugh. The only way to get over your nerves from performing is to do it. And if you do try comedy, or if you want to do it, trust me, that is one of the first things to go. Like eventually you stop caring so much about the public speaking element of it. You get used to failing in public. You still don't want to do it.
No,
you don't want to fail, but you at the very least you come to get used to it, and you don't mind as much.
That is very unique, especially both outlooks are very unique, especially having that awareness as a kid and realizing that the guy didn't want to, he had a fear as well. Like that's profound. That's something
thank you.
like a 70-year-old would say to their grandson or granddaughter or whatever, and be like, that you only did that because of so-and-so. So how did you have that awareness to realize, the fear of trying plagues so many people? Everyone will have examples. I've had it, short example. I played guitar at school, and then when I got to a certain stage, they wanted me to play for the school band, and I was very young, and I let that fear of failure or fear of trying to get in my way, and that's helped me now, but that's only because I've unpacked it, but I had no awareness then, and that's at such a young age.
Yeah, I don't know if I can pinpoint any sort of like more other moments that were sort of profound and made me think about it, but I definitely remember maybe also in science class, maybe our science teacher talking to us about it, or maybe again feeling like it had been discussed. But I don't know, maybe I just thought about the way that this particular friend of mine behaved a lot, because he had he was just an interesting character, and there were definitely, like I remember one time making a joke at his expense. I think he had a big iPod, and I remember asking if he was compensating for something. And,
that's when you knew you'd be a good stand-up.
Yeah. And I remember the teacher of the class laughed as well. and then when the teacher left the classroom, he came up and he punched me in the arm, and really hard. And I think then maybe there was a justification for why he was punching me in the arm. But I was definitely in my head, I was like, it's because I burned you earlier. That's why you were harboring onto that. Yeah. And I don't know, so maybe he was just a guy I was just always psychoanalyzing. So I don't know if I guess it was just something I recognized in myself, maybe, again, when I'm trying to think of when I went to uni, did I have a fear then of maybe there was an element of being, I think I did want to do TV writing and stand up or other things, but I felt, I don't know if it was a pressure or I just felt I should be doing economics or the business degree.
Internal or family or just general? You thought this is what you had to do?
I'd say both. I definitely remember going to a uni day and there was a philosophy class, like an intro to philosophy thing that the humanities did, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. It hooked me immediately. Yep. I was just like, these are such interesting questions.
What was the question they asked you?
It was, so first of all, they did imagine, there's a trolley hurtling down the tracks, and the trolley's about to hit 5 people, and you're standing by a lever, and if you pull the lever, it'll divert the trolley, but it'll hit one person. What do you do? And everyone, and I assume you're the same, everyone in the class said we would pull the lever and let the trolley hit one person. That's the overwhelming intuitive response. And then they put up another thing, and they said, imagine you're a doctor in an isolated village. You have 5 patients, each with a unique condition. One's having liver failure, one's having kidney failure, so on and so forth. And then a hermit arrives in your hospital with a very minor condition, stub toe or a sore foot or whatever. And while you're running tests on them, you realize that this hermit is a perfect donor for all your 5 patients.
That's good.
Do you kill the one hermit to save your 5 patients? And everyone says no. But in the first example, you're willing to kill 1 to save 5. But in the second example, you are not. You are willing to let 5 die to save and save 1. And so it's like immediately it's like, oh my God, I don't know what to think. What's going on? This is crazy. That there's like, morality. It's so fundamental and so important. But I don't have any of the ideas figured out. It's all just a mishmash.
Yeah.
And I remember being so excited and wanting to do that. But I definitely remember my mum. I don't think she realized maybe how big an impact this line would have on me. But I definitely remember her being like, "Oh, I don't know. These are the kind of questions people have just been asking forever." And it definitely did make me. I definitely was like, "Oh, my mum doesn't want me to study it," which is
have to do it.
Yeah, which is understandable. And it's not like I was but I did feel like, oh, I need to study economics or business or something to justify doing all these arts degrees, all these subjects and stuff.
Oh, so you did do that as well?
I still did it, yeah, but I did economics on the side. But I definitely was in my head. I was like, I don't know if I'd started watching 30 Rock at this point, but I definitely remember viewing Liz Lemon as like I would like to have that kind of life. Like I would like to be a head writer on a TV show, and I still would love to be a head writer on a sitcom. But
that's the goal.
Yeah, but I did. Yeah, my mum saying that to me. I mean, I guess I just sort of ignored her and still enrolled in the subjects I wanted to.
That's pretty brave because external influences, parental influence, they can really, because I did a commerce degree and I have applied that.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And I remember maybe eventually I did switch to philosophy. And I definitely remember my mum being on the phone to my cousin who's closer to her age than mine. And my mum saying, "Oh yeah, we always thought he was studying economics or whatever, but he switched to philosophy or something." It'd be like, oh no, but it was also, I don't know. I was just kind of in control. I guess I was kind of in control. I was the one sending away the forms and stuff. So I think it was easy to keep my parents ignorant of the actual courses I was picking and stuff.
That is hilarious. So I've got a meeting for this, or a deeper meeting. How did they respond when you'd left your prison corrections job to do comedy? Was that scary for them?
That's a really good question, and I don't in all my comedy career I don't really remember any kind of resistance from them for what I've done. I think my mum, bless her heart, she always I think had a faith in me that I would do well, and I was always like a nerdy kid, I was always book smart, I believe, and voracious reader and all the the classic kinds of things. Yep. So I think my mum had a trust that like, it doesn't, like, he's going to turn out okay. Yep. So and also I guess I had gotten a degree, gotten a proper job and stuff. So maybe there was a trust there. But when I left, I had been nominated for the Billy T Award for the first time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there was like enough external validation.
So I thought you left way earlier the correction job. I didn't realize that you were that deep into it.
No, it's more that I got nominated for the Billy T 2 years into my comedy degree. Into comedy, maybe a year and a half. But I was still living in Wellington the first time. I will say, when you get nominated for the Billy T, they make you do the way you get judged is you have to do a solo show, and my solo show was terrible. And after our year, they did change the rules and say you had to have already done one solo show before they let you apply. And they tell me that they didn't do that in response to how bad our shows were. But I'm like, I think I ruined that. Yeah, I think I accidentally pulled the ladder up behind me and made it a bit more difficult to get nominated for that award. But
the Ray O'Leary Award.
Yeah, but. Yeah, I was still at corrections at that time, and I definitely was, because I definitely remember someone in my work being like, "Oh, I got an email and saw you had been, like I'm on the comedy festival email list and I saw you had been nominated." And
Nice.
yeah, and so I never really had any resistance. I think my parents trusted that. I had saved up enough money on my own, and I when I left corrections, I still did a part-time job. I would do admin, and then and I slowly scaled back down the hours until eventually comedy became the full-time thing. And so I think they were like, "Oh, he's not being reckless about it."
Yeah.
And I never did have to ask. I was, again, because I had planned it, and and I'm also someone who doesn't really, at least back then, I never spent that much money on anything. So I never had to ask them for money or anything like that. And I had been keeping track. This is advice, I think, for up and coming comedians. Where as soon as you start, create a new bank account, and any money you get from comedy, just put it in there. Do not touch it, and then do the math on how much you've earned. And if it's enough, per week or per month or whatever, then go full time, which is what I did. Like straight away, I had set up a bank account, and I was keeping a spreadsheet of how much money I had in that account, and was trying to work out on average how much had I been earning per week from comedy. And eventually, once I hit subsistence level, I realized I'd been hitting subsistence level for about a year, and I was like, okay, I think it's probably safe for me to go to do comedy full time. Like, I'm not going to be having an amazing life, but I will be, covering groceries and rent. So
I like that. You had that safety net. You didn't, because sometimes if you quit everything, then you're like, oh my God, this has to work, and you're forcing it a lot quicker, and that can take away from the creativity, can make you go mad. So you actually had that safety net, which has obviously set you up.
Yes, though, to be fair, I mean, there are some people who respond really well to that sort of no safety net. But I could imagine that I was the kind of person who would not have, who would have been freaking out about not having any money. Like it is a thing that makes me, it's not a good quality to have, but I am someone who feels anxious about not having enough money for a rainy day.
Everyone's unique. I think that works perfectly for you as well. I also remember that you had a conversation with like your manager or something. Can you tell me about it? And
is this when I left my job? Yes, this was the final admin job I had. And I had, to be fair, I'd only been there for 3 months, and my boss, she sat me down and she said, look, we've noticed you've been showing up to work an hour late. And when I look in your computer, you're always on Facebook. Could you please stop doing that? And I was like, yeah, okay, you got me. And then the next day I handed in my resignation.
Was she shocked, or she's like, fair enough?
No, I think she was shocked. And then later on we had a talk, and she was like, you didn't resign because of that meeting we had where I told you to show up to work on time, and I was like, and in my head I was like, well, it was actually quite reasonable for you to ask me to do that. So
that's pretty big of you.
Yeah, so I was like, no, it had nothing to do with that. But in my head I was like, it was a bit to do with that.
Oh, of course. Like she found out what you were doing, and you're like, oh, okay, the gig's up.
Yeah, I was just like, I mean, I was doing some work, but I wasn't doing heaps, and it was not a no offense to people who do admin, but I did not find it a fulfilling job. And I was that particular office, I was sat looking at a pillar. Right next to me, they had put up a wall so I couldn't see the other admin person, and then behind me was the door to my boss's office.
So you couldn't actually talk, or
I just sat there and I could hear other people talking, but I couldn't talk to anyone without getting up and moving out of my little cubicle. It felt like the British office, when they do the external shots, and it's just that tiny window in a brutalist brick building.
Wait, that reminds me, when I was an accountant, everyone on the team was on the other side of the building, and I just started. It was me, my manager, who he hated everyone, and then a lady that was just starting out, so she didn't know what she was doing, but they were so much higher than me, and just me. And then another guy who I got along with really well, but he was always a client. So there's 4 or 5 of us in the team, and then the other 50 members on the other side, and they're all going out for lunch and laughing.
Yes.
I'm like, what am I? I'm at the corner next to the partner, so I need to be careful if I'm looking at my fantasy football team and all that stuff, because he's watching. And
yes, it was. Yeah, that kind of stuff is just.
I actually like it now because it forced me to leave quicker than I would have otherwise.
Yes, yeah. But I mean, that is part of the reason why I left was the terrible conditions where I was not allowed to go on Facebook all day. But,
how dare that?
Yeah, but also at the time, and this is not a good reason, but I went on 7 Days, which is the New Zealand panel show. And doing
Is that Jono and Ben?
No, I had been doing Jono and Ben.
Yeah.
Well, that and then that got cancelled. I was on the final season, but I don't think my hiring impacted. Yeah, I think it had just been on for quite a while.
Are they like the Hamish and Andy of New Zealand?
Yeah, they are. But the show, I mean, I've seen some of Hamish and Andy's show, but I would say the John and Ben TV show is harder to describe what it is. Like there was like a political, there was like a monologue on the week's news, but then there was also like sometimes they would do interviews with people, and then also there were like guest segments where like different.
It was like a daily show almost.
Yeah, there was like
more skits.
Yeah, it was like there was just a lot going on, and I'm not sure if this like I used to watch it. It started when I first went to uni, and so maybe I watched the first season, but definitely there was an element where there was like, oh, what is this show? Like, there's lots of different things going on. Yeah. But it was, it was a great starting out point, and I was so lucky to be a part of it. And it was very cool. Like I'd, act in these sketches every week or every couple of weeks, and I would write for it as well, which was so helpful. Being forced to write for
someone else.
Someone else in a broad audience, and doing that kind of work. I think New Zealand was such a paradise because early on in my comedy career there was just so much TV work for comedians that even someone like myself who was very new was getting these writing jobs, and the writing forces you to you're writing to a broad audience, and it's just training you, and you're being forced to write about things you don't care about. So hopefully when you do come to something you do care about in your stand-up, suddenly you're a lot funnier because you've sort of learned all the tricks on how to write about.
That's a great outlook.
It was I really appreciated that I had that opportunity. I'm very lucky.
Is that what you got from 7 Days as well?
Yeah, yes. And the 7 days, when I appeared on it the first time, that was definitely the element where I felt like, oh, I've made it. Or that was sort of the moment where I was like, I can stop questioning whether or not I belong to comedy. I'm here now. I'm a part of the industry. I like, this is the show, and it was like I guess the closest equivalent is maybe Have You Been Paying Attention here in Australia, or Mock the Week in Britain. Like it's that kind of show, and also it's been so long running, it kind of had this natural esteem to it. And so if you went on it, that's something my parents could point to and be like, look, my son's on, my son's on 7 Days. What's your kids doing?
Yeah, that's so awesome. Because when you first started out, and I want to tie in a few things as well, I believe your definition of success was just earning like enough money to kind of cover the bills almost.
Yes. When I first started, I was like, if I can do that, then I don't have to work at my day job anymore. I will have all this free time. Life will be good. And anything beyond that is just a bonus.
And do you still apply that now? Given all the success, the TV shows, what you've been able to do and tour around the world, have you expanded on that, or is it still the same?
I get a mix. I would say what I hope to achieve has increased, which is natural. That hedonic treadmill we're all on, where you acclimatise to what you have, and you naturally start to want more. So my goals are a lot, I guess, have gotten bigger. I no longer want to just make subsistence wages, but at the same time, I do try to keep in mind, like, oh, remember when you first started out and that's all you wanted to achieve.
Oh, that's
and
great.
Look at what you've achieved since. And I'd have had that thought of like, oh, if I die tomorrow, that'd be okay because look at what I've done. Like I've done all these things that I never thought I possibly could. I was on panel shows with Di Henwood and Paul Eager, and Jeremy. I did the big comedy show in New Zealand. I've done Taskmaster. I've done Have You Been? Like I walked down the street in Melbourne, and people, like even on the way here to this podcast, I walked past someone who was like stocking a liquor store, and definitely the way she looked at me, I was like, oh, she's.
You want an autograph?
Yeah, like she was like, she said hello to me or something,
Oh, that's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah, and so maybe she didn't realize why she knew me, but there was just like that happens, and it's my life is just so much, and to think all I wanted was to make subsistent wages and live in New Zealand, and now I can afford to fly to Edinburgh and do the Fringe for a month, and so I try to remember that to help hopefully keep me grateful and grounded somewhat of
That is amazing. And I like how you put it all in perspective because, as you said, we're all humans. We want more and more. And to be able to go back to that, that's rare. Because we can always focus on what's not going right, or I don't have a sold out show and all of that stuff. So it sounds like you've got a great level head.
Yeah, I mean, there's not having a sold out show, that stuff still bothers me, obviously. You know,
that's the most stressful thing as a comedian. I need to sell these tickets.
Yes, 100%. All that stuff, you know, like it's not like I'm some, you know, I haven't achieved nirvana, but there is
soon.
But yeah, soon. But I'm so close, guys. I just got a couple more attachments to get rid of. But I just do feel, I just do think it is important to think like, oh, you know, so many people kill to be in the position I'm in, you know, and it's important to take stock and things like that, you know, and obviously it doesn't apply to everyone, but to me, I find that a really helpful way to you know, make sure don't get too, you know, like you know, the job I want to have is to make people laugh. It's insane that anyone wants to pay for that service at all. I'm so lucky I was born in a place in the world where I get to do that. You know, I mean, and part of that luck and that makes me that's part of the reason why I feel obliged to, you know, donate to charity and things like that, where you're like, I have to, because it's just such a matter of luck that I'm here, and you know, I wasn't born earlier. But anyway,
no, I love it. I think it's extremely empowering. Also, you emulate. You're not just saying. You're not reading off your hand. I am so grateful. You feel it.
That's good. Well, I'm glad I'm glad you feel it. But obviously I'm not, you know, always like this. But
you're a human. There's highs, there's lows. Bad shows, ticket sales. You could have been funnier. All of that. Natural.
But at the end of the day, I do think, I would never have imagined, you know, that like even doing this podcast, like it's like when the fact that there's someone who's like, can you come on and talk about your career or your life, like that's insane that I've got into this position. That's crazy.
It's crazy to me that you're doing this. So it's funny how it works.
So that's, I don't know. That's, I think, something that I think is, I don't know if it works for every. I've definitely tried to give that advice to other comedians, like being like, there are so many open micers who'd kill to be in your spot right now. And then they said, I don't give a F what other open micers think.
I love that.
Which is like, okay, I understand.
Yeah. No, it's amazing.
Oh, that's what I didn't say. Not that that's that important, but when I did 7 days for the first, and I had, weirdly, I had been doing John and Ben, but I really felt the feeling when I did 7 days. I was like, I've made it. I belong in comedy. Like, I shouldn't question so much whether or not I should do this job. And that was also what like compelled me to quit my job, my day job, because I started to feel embarrassed that I had this day job and I'd been on New Zealand's biggest panel show, even though I probably could have done with some of the money that and the security the job provided me. But I was then making subsistent wages, so I could quit, you know, and move on. But I just felt embarrassed. I was just self-conscious. I was like, I think, it's so weird to be like, I've been on TV and now I'm gone to do this day job. And I mean, it is New Zealand, it's small and not everyone can just, you know, TV's not
even in Australia as well. Like New Zealand's much smaller.
Yeah.
Australia's much smaller. I had this one lady this happened heaps, but she just springs to mind. She was in Neighbours and she did like a proper run on the show Neighbours. Yeah. And then she was at a wedding catering.
Oh.
And people recognized her from the show. And she's actually turned this into a play and potentially a TV show.
Oh,
and
amazing.
And the wedding couple, they asked her to sign the back of their wedding. And she's, so it's like the highs and the lows. Yeah. That's kind of like imagine being on this big show and then you have to go back and earn money because that's life.
Yes, there's an American actor it happened to, but I don't know the shows because they didn't air in New Zealand. It was either like Different Strokes or the Jeffersons or something. But one of the actors was spotted packing bags at Trader Joe's, I think, and it became like a big story. And he was just like, "Yeah, look, I did that show long ago, and you know, I have to pay the bill somehow." And it's but I was like, I felt the thing that probably other artists feel, which is like, I'm not a real artist if I have this day job and I can quit and I don't like it, so I will quit. But it's not a great reason, but that was the primary motivation.
I think it's important. I feel that as well, especially because you feel like unless if I'm earning a certain amount of money, that is the success, but you can still be the artist in your own way as well.
And I will say I had the converse happened. Before I did 7 days, I used to be like, oh, it's embarrassing to call myself a comedian because I'm not doing it full time.
Yeah.
And I was I didn't love to talk about it, but it would, I definitely felt like it was wrong to be like, oh, I'm a comedian because I wasn't a professional comedian.
It's funny, like whether it's internal, external pressures and what we put on ourselves, but at the end of the day, you were doing it and the rest is history. Oh, actually, before I forget, I'm very excited for your shows. You're touring. Can you please tell me about them?
Oh, yes.
Especially Melbourne Comedy Festival. If people want to check it out, they're in the episode notes below. Continue.
Oh, thank you. Yes. My show, Laughter I Hardly Know Her, is coming to Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Auckland, Wellington, all over, and then maybe some places the rest of the world I'll announce later. I think return to Adelaide. Anyway, I guess we haven't discussed the nature of my comedy. Well, I mean, we have it, but my shows...
Sorry, that's my wife.
oh, hello. She's gorgeous.
I get that all the time.
Yeah.
Joel Creasy was on the other day. I think he was quite surprised about the difference in looks. Like, fair enough.
Hello, lovely to meet you.
The nature of your style.
The nature. Oh yes, my stand-up shows. I eschew sort of the large arcing narratives, and my shows don't tend to have a theme. They're not the. I assume your listeners are more comedy nerds than the average, so I don't mind telling them sort of somewhat point blank that it's not the kind of show where there's going to be a moment at the 45-minute mark where I reveal my dad has died. Or so, I don't do that kind of stuff. So it's mostly just an hour of me telling jokes and the funniest things that I think that have happened, and
guaranteed laughs.
Yeah, guaranteed laughs.
Pure comedy.
Yeah, distract yourself from your troubles for an hour.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and that's always the kind of model that I've enjoyed, and it is interesting. It is. I mean, maybe I'm getting weirdly defensive, but it does feel like it's the most common kind of model you see on specials.
Barney, sorry,
that's a green tea.
That's my dog.
Yes, it's it's the way Jerry Seinfeld does his shows and things like that. It's the way Norm Macdonald, all the big comics kind of just do jokes. But it's interesting because we live in Australasia or because we live in the Edinburgh sort of model. People ask you what your show's about, and I always have to be like, oh, my show's not really about.
I appreciate that as well, because it's very hard, especially also when you start. I'm going on probably a tangent that might not be applicable, but given your style and your comedy, you don't need that. Like, you're there for the you're there for the jokes. And I like that, because sometimes when there's like a Melbourne Comedy Festival show, you give it the name and you're like, okay, it has to be like this, and I have to do themes and arcs, and you've expanded on this for months, so it's probably changed a lot along the way as well.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, and again, like you said, I'm envious of the people who do the narrative and things like that. But I have one of my first shows, I did try to do that and like try to reflect on an experience I'd had, and it just felt so hollow and insincere, and I just knew, I can't repeat this emotion night after night, and eventually it'll become dead to me, and I just again, like again, I was talking about with improv, being sincere on stage is just something I don't love doing, and I just hated sort of this fun bearing of the soul right at the end of the show.
But it's also, and I haven't thought about it like this, it's one thing with the emotional elements, but if you're doing a run of, 20 shows or whatever it is, that is hard to recreate as well.
Yes.
That could also be quite taxing on the soul and the body, reliving a certain thing. And you're doing it,
Yes,
very interesting.
Yes, Stuart Lee has a great bit in Carpet Remnant World about sad comedy shows where he sort of cynically criticizes people who are he talks about his wife goes to a show and it made her cry because his dad died. The comic's dad died, and he says, I don't think it's just impressive that he was managed to not be able to resolve his grief long enough that he was able to tour it commercially.
That's so good. I love this stuff. And the name. Is there a meaning to the name, or is it also one of those things where, like, I had Akmal, his name of the show is Akmal, because he's like, I don't know what the name of the show is going to be.
That's a great name. Basically, the past couple of years, I've been trying to think of a funny name for the show. And so the year before I had Your Laughter Is Just Making Me Stronger, which I had people complimenting me on the name.
I love that.
Oh, thank you. I was very proud when I thought of that, and because I did have a backup option, same with this year, of a pun name, but I also do want to...
What was the pun?
The pun is, I can see O'Leary now. The ray has gone, and it's like because I saw Glenn Moore. He had a show called "Will You Still Love Me? Will You Still Feed Me?" Glenn, I'm 60 more, which is obviously such a tortured pun. And I was like, can I think of a tortured pun on my own name? But I don't know. I'm trying to eschew puns from show titles.
That. If I was to do a comedy show, I'd either call it A, so it's the first one. Or like, you maybe, I've thought about this in depth, or maybe like CCCC or DDD, so that way, they might want to look through the first page or the second page, and then do it right there.
MMMM, that's the 13th letter of the alphabet right in the middle.
Yeah, perfect. You could use that one. Yeah. Cool. Those are all in the episode notes so people can check it out. It's guaranteed laughs. You've heard it here. I reckon what we'll do to wrap up the podcast is a rapid fire segment.
Yes, absolutely.
Ready to rumble?
Yes.
Okay, this isn't really a question. This is just more a compliment, but we'll make it a question. How does it feel to be part of this New Zealand golden era of comedy?
Oh, it's great. We come in for your jobs. There's got to be no. It's interesting. It's lovely that the Australian audiences have embraced us with such open arms. I don't feel like an active backlash from the other Australian comedians, but you do hear whispers that maybe sometimes they're annoyed that so many, like James Donald Forbes McCann, who's now opening for Shane Gillis in America, very funny comic. I remember he asked me, why are all the best comedians in Australia New Zealanders?
That podcast, I listened to it, and I want to have him on the podcast. It sounded like it was just a rant that it was funny, that he's like, why am I not popular with the New Zealand crowd? It was just him speaking out loud, and then you occasionally speaking when he allowed you to. That sounded, was it hilarious?
Yeah, it was. He's such a funny man. Yeah, I'm glad I'm happy for him to take as much space as he needs. But I think there's just an element of New Zealand crowds really tough, really not great to perform in front of, and
why is that?
They're so reserved, don't like to laugh. I think there's New Zealand. We have a big thing with tall poppy syndrome.
Worse than here.
Yeah, absolutely, I would say. New Zealanders hate their own comedians. So there's a strong undercurrent that, like, New Zealand hasn't had a funny comedian since Billy T. James, who's a guy who was popular in the 70s and 80s. And so there's just this feeling that, none of us are good at our jobs. And the people who do come and do want to laugh, New Zealanders are just naturally reserved. And I feel like I think there's almost a feeling like, if I laugh too loudly, I'm going to draw attention to myself, which is, I don't want that. And so you just have to work really hard to get anything out of them. And I think we're trained with weights on, and then we come to Australia, you come to Melbourne, a comedy savvy city, and it's just like, oh my, this is amazing. Like, it feels like there's no gravity here, like I'm floating about, and the crowds are just so nice. But I do think within Australia, there's a similar thing where, like, my friends tell me that, like, Brisbane crowds are tough, and then and there are so many good comics who come out of Brisbane and then move to Sydney or Melbourne.
I reckon that's probably, I know it's rapid fire, so this will be the only time I comment on them, but I feel like, as you said, it's made you guys stronger, and all of you, this is just off the top of my head, I just wrote it down, so I probably forgot someone, but like David Corrios, Hayley Sproul, Chris Parker, Guy Williams, Guy Montgomery, Melanie Bracewell,
Ursula Carlson started in New Zealand, who's now sells the most tickets in the Melbourne Comedy Festival out of anyone.
Oh, wow.
Or she has at least for 3 years in a row. So,
but especially with her, because she's been doing it for a very long time and she's hilarious, but that wave, you're all like similar age and similar experience levels. It's probably the New Zealand crowds being so tough that you had to work that extra hard.
Yes, 100%. Yes, that's 100% what happened. And then I think there's an element of Australia and New Zealand, weirdly, despite how close our countries are, there hasn't been much cross-pollination, definitely comedy culture-wise. Like New Zealand, we got no Australian comedy on TV. We had Kath and Kim and Summer Heights High, but I never saw, I don't know, the D Generation. What are they called? The panel. That Rove was on, but there was such little Australian.
Rove was the best. I know that I think you've met him, and
yes, such a lovely man.
Well. I'm surprised that if they're not showing everything else, they're showing Rove. Like, that's weird how they pick what content.
Yeah, so I guess it's just the deals that the stations make. But we got very little Australian content, and I imagine you guys got no New Zealand content, and so it's kind of like we've been just working away without anyone looking at us, and then suddenly you show up somewhere and you're like, oh, these guys are new, and they're actually good. And so I think, you kind of have that new factor. So that gives you an advantage.
But you're not even that new, and I know everyone thinks you knew because you guys have been doing it for a while. But
we're new to Australia, and
gotcha.
And so the people, the bookers are like, oh, this is great. This is someone we haven't seen before, and it's exciting to have them. And I think there's an element of feeling fresh,
I like that.
And then also, New Zealand had Australia. We did a New Zealand version of Have You Been Paying Attention, which effectively functioned as an audition for the Australian Have You Been?
Did you know that it was an audition at the time?
No, I did not. No. I just knew it was like one of the biggest opportunities I'd been given at the time, and I just needed to be sure I was really good at it.
Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, but I mean. Yeah, I saw one of the questions I was given in advance for this podcast was, what was your big break?
Yeah,
and I remember feeling like I'd reject the assumption within the question of this, the notion of a big break. There's that saying, everyone's an overnight sensation, 15 years in the making, and it does feel like, I'm not sure if I've had a big break, and breaks are relative to your level of success. Like when I first started, my big, if you'd asked me, a year in, either my big break then would have been being booked on The Medicine, which is the first non-open mic I was booked on, or I would say I haven't had a big, but it feels like my life has been a series of several small breaks. You get given an opportunity that's a bit above where you're currently at. Like, I was doing open mics, and you get asked to do not an open mic, and if you do well at that, then suddenly you've unlocked like the next level of comedy, and you're being booked in all these other shows. And then, I go to Auckland, I do the comedy club, and if I do well there, then I've sort of unlocked a certain, now I can do, the Friday late show. And if I'm good enough at the Friday late show, it unlocks me the Friday early show. And then it feels like life is like, there was no big break. I mean, obviously there are some things that have gotten me more attention than others, but it always feels like, life has been a series of little breaks, and you just have to be ready for when that next opportunity comes, and it sort of unlocks the next level for you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that answer, and I'm glad. So what I do is, as you know, I send out like mock questions just to get the guests thinking, and I love that you picked that one as well, and I love how you thought about it, because it's just to get you to think, and you went on to a level which I appreciate. So
yes. I mean, if I had to pick out two big breaks, though, I would say Have You Been Paying Attention Australia and Taskmaster New Zealand, which I think have massively increased the number of people who are aware of me. But again, I mean, and I guess in a sense they are big breaks, because they're like, a lot of people now know who I am from it. But hopefully that's not, hopefully there's something more coming in the future.
We'll get that TV show you were talking about as well.
There are more things hopefully it's not the end of the line. But for now, relative to where I am, those were definitely the things that have sort of pushed me to where I am now.
Cool. And I know you said you don't necessarily have like goals in the do this or do that. As you said, maybe having a TV show. What are the things that you...
Yeah, I do have goals. Sorry, maybe I didn't answer your question earlier quite properly, but I do have goals, some of which aren't in my control. Like, like I did have a goal. I actually did have the goal of maybe getting nominated for Best Newcomer at Melbourne, and maybe getting nominated for Best Show. Maybe not Best Show. Maybe I thought that was out of my reach. But I definitely had, like, within 5 years, I want to achieve this, and I wrote a list down. I think I've since lost the list, but every year I do try to create, like, a list of goals of, like, what is something I would like to achieve. And it's like, some of it's like write a bit that lasts this amount of time. That I would love to, I would love to, because it feels like then I'd be pushing myself creatively. And, there are some things like getting nominated for certain awards, which are out of your control, and so I'm not super fussed about that, but they are obviously nice to have.
Yeah.
And would suggest a level of critical success, which I would like, as well as commercial success. Commercial success is fine, but I don't need to fill the O2 or fill Rod Laver. There is I'm happy to trade some level of commercial success to make sure I'm still creatively interesting.
Oh, very interesting.
And but it's very easy to say that when you are being able to make a living from doing comedy. It's very easy to be, again, gracious in victory. But and then there are other elements. I've forgotten. I mean, if I looked on my phone, I'd be able to check what the goals were, because I sent them to my friends and asked, what are your goals for the year? And
that's really unique.
Yeah, and I think there were things like, I want to do this festival for the first time, and I want to try break into this territory, and there were things like that. And I think things sell more tickets this year than I sold last year to indicate, that my show last year was good and growing. And there was also things like maybe be less precious about my show this year, or be willing to work on it between shows, which I have been, and I've been trying to be a lot more critical about it, and or feel less that it's final, and always think about what's the bit that I don't think is working as well as I would like it to be.
I like that. That's very unique, just sharing the goals. I think that's a brilliant way as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably be willing to read them off my phone
if you want.
If you want me to, but I just have to go get my phone.
Yeah. No,
it was a matter of whether or not I can find them.
No pressure whatsoever.
Yeah, there were things like work on a TV pitch, start working on a television show. Write a good show and work on it. Try get nominated for awards, sell more tickets in different areas that I'm returning to indicate, that I'm growing, and that the show last year was good and stuff.
These are great.
And then there's some personal ones as well, like learn to balance my time more, which I've not done at all. I've not done, which is evidenced by how long this podcast is going for. I'm just willing to sacrifice my time.
I'm worried for your time.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, no, yeah. So they're all things that I remember.
Those are great. I appreciate that.
Yes, but yeah.
Oh, cool.
No, yeah, sorry. I didn't know. Yeah, I was just trying to think, but no, I don't think I have anything.
No, I think
to add.
that's great. I really one of the many takeaways from that. I'm not going to comment on it anymore after these. Is I like the sharing of ideas and actually putting pen to paper, because it's one thing to have it in your head, but actually, there's a bit of accountability that way.
Yes, and I wrote some, and it's a shame. I think I lost the bit of paper, but I think I did achieve some of the goals that I wrote down. Like I think one was it was pre doing Melbourne for the first time, but I think I got nominated. I think one of them was getting nominated for Best Newcomer at Melbourne, and I did do that.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's very cool. But again, some of these things, it probably isn't healthy that some of those things are goals, because some of them, well, at least you're willing to acknowledge that they're outside of your control and don't necessarily mean anything. They mean something, but they don't mean everything, and you shouldn't beat yourself up for not getting an award because it's just what 5 random judges think or whoever.
That's a good perspective. And shifting gears, what superpowers does your suit give you?
That's interesting. Probably sort of a power of boredom, or like
power of boredom.
Like I think it makes me seem like a less interesting figure. Maybe I think the whole point of the suit is in part that I don't have to think about what I'm wearing on stage, and hopefully it adds to the character I present. And I have, I think I would like to try cultivate this vibe that I'm not, when people are seeing me for the first time, they're like, is this guy even a comedian, or is he just sort of wandered on stage from his day job? And it's like, it's a mistake that he's here. Yep. And that's, so I guess I feels like the powers it gives me is like this molding the audience's perception of me. Like, again, if you look at the suit, like, the shirt doesn't fit, and the suit, I used to have a worse suit, and it was like the colors were, it was sort of like, if you looked at it at a certain angle, you'd be like, what is going on with the colors, and so it looks like I've put an effort, but I've not done it quite right, which I quite like, this idea of like, oh, he's trying, but he's kind of hasn't figured it out.
Cool.
Yeah, that's right. That's it. Yeah.
No, what are you most proud of?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think, what am I most proud of? Comedy-wise, thinking maybe I'd have to say Taskmaster New Zealand. My time on there was a phenomenal time. I wish I could do it again, like have another bite of the cherry, but be greedy. And because that's a show, with stand-up, you control so much of what the audience sees of you. Like if I feel like talking about a topic, then I'll talk about it. If I don't want them to know something about me, then I just won't talk about it. But Taskmaster, you're on a time limit, and so you kind of have to do the first idea, the second idea that you think is funny or you think will be good. And so the audience see a much more authentic and vulnerable side of you in a way, because you're doing basically your gut instinct. And the fact that so many people, it feels like so many people resonated with it and want to talk to me about it and stuff.
Oh, good.
It is quite validating because of that it feels like they sort of saw the real me, and they weren't disgusted or like, or they were like, oh, we get you, And so it's quite a really heartwarming
That's
to have happened. Yeah,
I'm glad you had it, and I saw as well how many people loved it, even on like Reddit forums and stuff.
Yeah,
they'll talk about it.
Yes, the subreddit is a very positive culture, so they're very kind.
Cool. And last question before I ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you. What is the one question I should have asked you?
Oh, what's the one question you should have asked me? Maybe you should have asked me about my spreadsheet.
Tell me the spreadsheet. Which spreadsheet?
I've been bad at keeping it up to date, but I after every show or after when I do new material now, I will listen back to my set and I normally have a spreadsheet of each bit. And I will rank how each joke did on a scale of 0 to 5, and it's color coded, and I keep track of how long the laughs went for and stuff. And then I try to calculate my laughs per minute and how strong each joke did, and that's sort of my method, and how long the bit goes for, and it's sort of my method of trying to evaluate whether or not I should keep certain jokes or
and that because it puts like your bias aside as well.
Yes, and that's something I've done from after my very first show. I started color coding jokes and things like that.
Cool.
Yeah, so I've always done that. It's harder to do now because now I gig a lot more than, in New Zealand I was doing 1-2 gigs a week.
Yeah.
So it was a lot more manageable, and now it's a bit harder, but it's something I try do, and I think the spirit of it remains, and I think it's one of the, maybe spreadsheeting is a bit extreme, but I think the whole reviewing yourself, listening back to yourself is so important, and any comic who doesn't do that is missing out on a chance to improve. But I do that now still. I listen back to shows and I'm like, oh, there's a really big laugh. I wish all the laughs sounded like that. What do I need to do to...
I love that. And, you could get a bit complacent with where you're at, but you still got, you still love it. You still want to improve.
Yes. Yeah. I had a friend, my flatmate, when I first started out, he said he loves it because, it's like you've taken an art form and try to take as much art of it as you can and make it as scientific as possible.
Oh, but you can see why you've been growing.
And another flatmate saw it and was horrified. He was a comedian. He said, at what point do you just pull an audience member on stage and start dissecting them to figure out where the laugh comes from?
Oh, that's brilliant. Before we go, how can people follow you and keep up to date with you?
At Ray O'Leary Comedy on all the main social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook. I believe there's a TikTok with my face attached to it. Linktree or livenation.com.au is where all my shows are listed. So you go check them out. Please come along. Our tickets are selling pretty fast. I'm very lucky. So if you want to come, move quick. If you don't want to come, I understand. I don't mind.
Cool. We'll get these out. We'll get this podcast out very quickly. All of that's in the episode notes. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. I love you got a very fresh and unique perspectives. I love it. And thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for such a well-researched interview.
I love how Ray gave himself permission to be bad initially in his mind redoing comedy. Often in life, we think we have to be really good at something we enjoy, or we must simply give it up. Ray had the maturity and awareness to realize that when he first started, he wouldn't be the world's greatest comedian, and gave himself the time and space to improve, grow, and develop so that he eventually would be the brilliant comedian we see today. As Ray says, he had to power through before he was able to confidently excel at comedy. So I'll leave you with this epic quote. I cannot express how important it is to believe that taking one tiny and possibly very uncomfortable step at a time can ultimately add up to a great distance. Tig Notaro. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.